Marcia did run a little long, so I've modified to get 3 minutes for the introduction, and 3 minutes for the closing, and 90 seconds to answer the various questions that have been submitted already from different organizations and businesses within the Chamber of Commerce. And then if you have a burning question, go and put it in the chat. If we have time at the end, I will address that question. So with that, Jack Turner, are you ready to begin?
Ready to go.
All right, well, I will go ahead and start the timer. I upgraded. I thought this was kind of funny, but last time I had this sign, I have made an official sign now. So when you have 15 seconds left, I will hold this up, and then if you see me giving the cut sign, that means you're out of time. So with that, Jack Turner, I'll let you have your opening remarks. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Jack. And, I have to say that probably up until about a year ago, I never imagined I'd be in this place, but I think folks are ready for a change. And to say that my background is unusual for a candidate would probably be an understatement, but I think I can show you why it's relevant. And throughout my life, whether by choice or necessity, I've had to reinvent myself a lot of times, and I think that experience applies here. I believe that reinvention is the key to Plata County's long-term success, and I thought that long before the coronavirus pandemic struck. My path from a kid growing up here in Durango to CU Business School to the Olympic Games, the resort industry, mobile app development, television, all that stuff has been a pretty crazy ride. But after 30 years in the ski business, I got out and I became a technical writer for a cryptocurrency exchange, and I'd probably still be doing that, except they wanted me to move to Washington, D.C. I'm an active owner of our Turner family business, and recently I've been providing scouting and location management for film, television, and commercial shooting in the Southwest Colorado. So how is this relevant to La Plata County? Well, as disparate as my experience sounds, it's all actually connected by changing conditions and opportunity. And that's how I see La Plata County. I think that we're a connected system, and not just because every department's on the same spreadsheet. For example, in the coming weeks and months, I think I can make a case that agricultural prosperity, affordable housing, the recreation business, and permitting, I think they're all integrally tied together. And I know that it's not safe or normal to propose bold, new ideas to spur conversation or inspire others. And I also know there's going to be skeptics and critics because it's safe to avoid change and risk. It's human nature, Jack, to check all the boxes. But I think that we have to have more faith in our potential. And more importantly, I think we have to have more faith in each other. I think we're capable of being better. If a commissioner's focus is settling squabbles, then that's how our time is going to be used. If a commissioner's role is hands-on expertise to manage the minutiae of each issue, then we're limited by the mental and physical capabilities of 3 people. And how we perceive the role and responsibilities of the county commissioners, I think that's fundamental to the outcomes we'll see. And I'm asking the voters to set new expectations. In closing, I feel we've lost our way in government. The work of the people is no longer a team sport. Election tradition is to divide the voters and win by a few percentage points. The last commissioner's race was won by only 23. And as a result, it's nearly impossible to bring voters back together after the elections, after the parties pitted them against each other. And like anyone who's been in business here, I've got a wide range of experience with both county and city government. Most of those are good, and some of them not so much. And I certainly don't know everyone else's experience here, but I've gotten an earful, and I'll keep listening. And that's why for the past 8 months, I've been all over this county, across every single county-owned road, to fill in the gaps and learn about what most of us just take for granted. So I'll share some of those thoughts when Jack's throwing the questions at me here as they're coming up. And I just want to say to everybody on board and to the chamber, thank you very much for putting this on, and let her rip, Jack.
All righty, well, thank you. So one of the questions, the first one I'm going to ask, obviously we're on a Zoom call, and people have dove into the world of Zoom and telecommuting. How will you help bring the proper broadband infrastructure to ensure rural communities here like La Plata County have the ability to work remotely? And 90 seconds.
Okay, well, I mean, the county has several roles there. I mean, you know, the infrastructure you bring in for that certainly requires cooperation and planning for permitting and those sorts of things. I know that I believe it's the Council of Governments has been very tied into the broadband issue. I certainly am a user of broadband, and it's going to be key to our future, especially for people who are working remotely. And as you can all see from all the Zoom meetings we've had, obviously, I don't think we ever expected the bandwidth we need just to conduct our daily lives, especially in a condition like this. Jack, I don't know all the answers to how we might, as a county commissioners, assist in that. I suppose that there's going to be times when there will be incentives that could be offered, or tax breaks for private companies that may be involved. But I can, just like I'm sure all 4 other candidates, I can wholeheartedly support making sure that everyone has fair access. I don't need my 90 minutes, 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. So question number 2, kind of a broader question, but what will you do to support all businesses in the county, from agriculture, natural gas, retail, restaurants? Describe something that you would want to implement to be helpful for these struggling sectors.
Well, I think there's a couple of things, Jack, and the number one thing that county government can do is to make sure they don't run up unnecessary costs. Obviously the big hot topic right now is planning, permitting, and review, and those sorts of things. And as I've traveled around the county, I've just heard so many stories from folks trying to manage their business, whether it's building housing or some sort of project, or putting up a sign or getting a permit, and it just seems like it's the nature of government to keep running up the business, to keep running up the cost at the front end for these things. I think that one of the best things we can do to assist all businesses, make sure that we make it so that the businesses that are here can make money, because as they make money, they pay their taxes, they pay employees, they shop at other businesses. So, my main thing is that as far as private enterprise goes, we have to support, not hinder.
Thank you. So the next question, we always hear about affordable housing. What is your vision to make housing affordability a reality here in the Plata County?
Well, I almost go back to my last answer that we can't keep loading the front end of building housing, so that by the time you get to putting your shovel in the ground, you've already incurred so many expenses, because all expenses incurred are going to be added to the cost of the housing. I think that we have to be more flexible, and I hope that this new code that we're developing is going to give some flexibility. So whether there's, mobile home parks or prefab construction, or just neighborhoods that aren't going to have the same amenities as Dalton Ranch, we have to encourage that. I think that one of the things I've noticed over my lifetime here in Durango is that sometimes we sort of look down our nose at the lowest cost housing that's available for people, and I think we've got to reorient ourselves for that. A big part of that's going to be, cooperating between both the city and the county, is making sure that we don't put such onerous restrictions on for the first, builder, developer to come in, that it makes it impossible for the rest of them to come in. And I think we're going to have to participate in that. I think we're going to have to not take anything off the table, whether it's incentives or temporary tax breaks. There's all sorts of tools that could be used to make it so that the cost is less.
Sorry, my delay, holding signs, stopping the timer, and unmuting myself. I got to remember to unmute. So there's this one, there's so much turnover at the leadership levels within the county. And as this question was posed to me, don't you think it's interesting that we have turnover at nearly every leadership position except the county attorney's office, and our problems at the county have remained the same for 2 decades? Why do you think that is the case?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for turnover. People get, want to move on. People retire. I think one of the biggest issues we have as far as turnover within the ranks, as much as leadership, is the rate of pay and our working conditions. I mean, if you can get trained up as a La Plata County deputy here, and then as soon as you're all set and ready to go, you get recruited by the Front Range, well, we've got to start over to replace that person. some of the turnover isn't just due to what we pay our working conditions, it's due to what it costs to live here. So I don't see, a whole lot of malice in why there's a lot of turnover, and lots of job turnover here in Durango and La Plata County. Sorry.
No, thank you. So going kind of along the line of the county attorney question, do you feel it's a conflict for the county attorney's husband to be hired in a leadership position as finance director within the county?
Well, first of all, this isn't a hypothetical example, it's a real example, and these are both two people. So I think people got to really be careful about dabbling in someone else's livelihood without having all the facts at hand. I mean, certainly there is an appearance of that to a certain degree just because the question came up. But as far as I know, it's not against policy. They don't supervise each other. I'd want to know, well, why did, say, Adam Rogers get hired to be the finance director? Maybe there was no one else that was better than he for that job. We could be a small community. So I'm not prepared to throw a bunch of shade that way. What makes me the most nervous about just that setup, Jack, is that what happens if a commissioner gets crossways with one of those two people or any other two people within county government? Is that going to impact your dealings with the spouse? I think that's sort of problematic, but until you find out that there's really something wrong, I just prefer to judge each person on their talent they bring to the table.
Thank you. The next question has to do with La Posta Road. Are you in favor of development of La Posta Road?
Yeah, sure I am. And I think that between the county and the city, we've got to get our act together on getting the proper utilities down there and the infrastructure. And I don't think we have to build all the infrastructure up front, curb and gutter, all that sort of stuff, just to get a start down there. I've talked to a number of people that bought land down there thinking that they could move businesses down there, move activities down there. And the horror stories they've told me about requirements just to get started are just something I find extremely difficult to live with. That's an obvious way to move down or to move development south of Durango and into the county. As Marcia pointed out yesterday, that includes the Animas Air Park and that area. It's a big area. And it's certainly close enough. It'll be much easier to push in some infrastructure in that area than perhaps further out in the county. So I think we ought to seize that opportunity for sure.
And kind of along that same line, thinking of development, are you for or against road impact fees in La Plata County?
Well, it depends on how the impact fee is structured. I mean, it's one thing to say, for instance, if you got some of the gas industry trucks that are causing big damage on a road, and you're willing to set an impact fee to compensate for that particular damage. What I don't like is the idea of setting impact fees that really are just a profit-making center for the county. I think that's bad for business, and whether it. I've got concerns that some people are worried that as we start setting impact fees, or instead of taxes, is that going to be a way to tax farmers hauling cattle down the road? So there isn't a yes or no answer, but sure, under the right conditions, when it's fair and it is directly to offset the impact that a particular company or individual causes, I don't really have a problem with that, at least in concept. I do have the problem with the idea of impact fees being just a way to get around to the taxation issues and just raise more money.
Okay, thank you. Along the same line of, since we're talking about the taxes, are you for or against a use tax on vehicles? So currently, if you live in the county and you buy a vehicle, whether it's in Denver, Albuquerque, Farmington, you can save 2% on your taxes because we don't have a use tax for La Plata County. So are you for or against a use tax, and why?
Well, I hope I'm hearing the question right. Is you're talking about the difference in sales tax between the city of Durango and the county, and there's a difference there? Is that the use you're talking about?
Yeah. So if you live in the city and you buy a vehicle in Farmington, there is a 2% use tax. Whereas if you live in the county and you buy a vehicle out of the county, you save 2% on taxes when you go to register your vehicle because the county does not have a use tax.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess that, I'm sure the local dealers would like us to do that. And I just wonder, well, first of all, as far as I know, if it's a tax, the voters are going to have to vote it in the first place. And, I mean, our sales tax in the county is lower than it is in the city. So I guess we're going to single out a particular segment to tax. That kind of bothers me sometimes. I really think that we need to look at a broad-based approach. But, certainly nothing's off the table. I don't know what the exact amount you're proposing is or what anyone is. It's going to have to go before the public one way or another. And I suppose there will be good arguments on both sides. So I have a conditional yes.
All right, so going back, we talked a little bit earlier about the land use code, and right now it's currently in its draft form. Do you believe that the public comment should be in person and not via Zoom because of the COVID situation, basically putting a pause on the progressing the land use code forward? And second part, since you may be taking oath in January, would it be better to adopt the code after you take office?
Well, first of all, these are really difficult times. I mean, look what we're doing here with this Zoom meeting. And so I have to give a handout to the county staff who's, as far as I know, is trying their best to get these Zoom meetings to work for public input. But no matter how you dress it up, it's really not public input. You can't see who else is on the call. It's really hard to get that dynamic of a big group of folks that are together. God, I've had so much trouble trying to follow these meetings. Sometimes you can log in, sometimes you can't. So I don't really like the way it's going. And I just have to hope that it's going to turn out as best as possible, especially with what public comment they do get. One thing I'm certain of is that this land use code is going to be approved before the end of the year. And I guess as a new commissioner coming in, we'll have to see what tweaks we might make. I mean, no matter what, it's going to be a work in progress for years and years and years. But I've got some real concerns with how it's going right now. Especially the other thing that really bothers me about these Zoom meetings is that the audience has literally no control over their input. Until you get, I guess if you type in the chat box, you can get a little bit of input there. But I think it's really awkward, and for something that's important, I'm not sure that I think it's going the greatest right now. But we'll deal with it.
Okay, thank you. I've been on a lot of them, and just my own comment would be the planning department is doing a good job as far as providing the information, and I would encourage everybody to go to platacounty.org, and you can see the upcoming meetings, and they have specific topics that they are talking about. So if you haven't been involved with that, highly encourage that that you do get involved with the process. So Senate Bill 19-181 gives local control to oil and gas regulations for siting. And since current code has provisions already for siting, would you look at rewriting that code? And that's because since the state is also rewriting rules for oil and gas operations, which is protecting health, safety, welfare, and environment, and the wildlife, and it will be effective in November. Do you see a need for county staff to rewrite natural gas land use codes when it's being done at the state level?
Well, not now. I mean, we need to wait till we get the final draft and final approved code, and then see if there's anything needs to be changed. And over the last couple of years, particularly under the Hickenlooper administration, is that there's been a lot of changes that I think have helped us to do a better job of having regulations that are beneficial for the oil and gas producers, as well as the mineral rights holders and the public. And when you talk about oil and gas, and it's actually gas in La Plata County, is that many people don't realize that in addition to the huge tax base that it provides us, or a contribution to tax, I should say, is that there's like 6,000 mineral holders in this county. And some of the folks, especially on the south, I mean, their ranches, quite frankly, are subsidized in part by the mineral royalties they get. So, I think that, you can hear a lot of disparaging remarks about the energy, the energy industry, especially the fossil fuels. But that's really important to our county, and we're going to have some real struggles here because production's down, prices are down. We're going to take a big hit. Not just county coffers, but the people in the county who depend on that revenue for their livelihood. But in answer to your question, Jack, it's way too early for the county to rewrite those rules. And right now, I've got a feeling that the planning staff is fairly busy rewriting what they've got on their plate now.
Great, thank you. I know I always tell the story that 3 touch points with oil and gas. We have literally a quarter mile from my front door on the Mesa, 2 gas wells. I always say the operators of those gas wells have been better than some of my real neighbors. And then my son is a petroleum engineer, works for a production enhancement company, and my stepson gets a royalty check. But you just mentioned there's 6,000 royalty holders. So it does have a huge impact in our local economy. Moving along with the next question. With budgets of all governments declining in income, what is your potential solution to balance a budget without raising taxes? And these are yes or no, and then I'll let you comment. So would you consider, yes or no, furlough of employees?
Yes.
Cut costs with layoffs?
Yes.
Dissolve or consolidate departments?
Yes.
And cost share with other governments for communications or human resources, road and bridge, or share fleet maintenance?
Yes. Yes to all 4. I mean, you have to consider everything. Why would you not consider anything? Again, on one hand, you're dealing with the facts and figures of the budget and how you're going to make that balance. I mean, you have to make it balanced by law, but you're also dealing with people when we talk about the employee. The status of our employees, whether they're going to furlough or lay people off or eliminate departments. And there's some real human decisions there in addition to the effect it's going to have on the county. I like a lot the thought of Plata County and the city of Durango, the Bayfield, Ignacio, and the tribe. I mean, there's a lot of duplication there. And I've always heard that the city and the county, they just don't get along with each other. Everybody's got to stake out their little piece of the kingdom. And as we move forward, we've got to get past a lot of that. And I think there's a lot of smart people that could put their heads together and that they could figure out where we could do some savings that aren't going to be as painful or as damaging to the overall Little Plata County if they would put their head together and work together. So yeah, you have to consider every option on the table. That's it.
Sorry, I was trying to find the button. I was like looking
over here, Jack.
Things. Yeah, push the button.
I'm over here. My head's up here.
I'm going from the timer to the questions to a couple things. Actually, while you're speaking about that too, it was. I'm curious. Are you in favor? We just signed a letter of support for the state legislature to allow counties to delay collecting property taxes. And I see that Allison just jumped on the call and on this meeting. I'm throwing this in. Are you in favor of delaying the property tax collection right now during COVID?
Well, there's got to be some places where you've got to be flexible, and I don't know the details of that bill and how they're going to delay it. Like, do you get 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or is it dependent upon your circumstance? I mean, a lot of businesses actually did really well during the shutdown that we had. I think Home Depot and Krager's did awesome. There's another places that did well. So I don't know if Allison has the ability to make a case-by-case basis. I don't know what the proposed law is going to say, but every entity in the county is basically tied to people, and we've got to support each other during these times. So if part of support means we're going to have to give people a little bit of time to get their taxes in, I don't have any problem with that at all. I mean, they're people.
Great, thank you. All right, with Colorado's economy has been growing rapidly over the last few years, fueled by a strong job market and quality of life that defines Colorado experience. We have seen a ballot proposal to limit growth appear in state elections and local communities that would place arbitrary limits on growth that could cripple, future economic prosperity, creating growth burdens on already low inventory of housing available to the Colorado consumer. What are your thoughts on growth measures, and is there anything that you would want to do to limit growth, or are you for pro-growth?
Well, every growth limitation measure that I've seen, the result is it just makes it so that it drives the prices up, and essentially you just have more and more wealthy people, and the workforce has to travel from outside the county to get here. I'm not favoring of arbitrary growth initiatives. I think Marcia pointed out the other day, we're going to have 70,000 people in this county, and they're coming. I mean, unless we all quit having babies and people don't want to move, there's going to be growth. You got to be smart about it. I don't think you want to make unnecessary incentives that make we have sprawl, but there's also natural limitations that'll help us keep from, having growth that I guess some people would consider undesirable. But from the 6 generations my family's been here, well, let me put it this way: all of us, except for the Southern Ute tribe, we all moved in at one time. And there's a great propensity to say, I want to be the last person here. I want to shut the door. Rather than doing that, I just think we've got to be smart about it. And I'm really concerned that if we have some sort of formal initiative, that the end result is going to be that it's not going to limit growth that much. It's just going to drive up prices.
Thank you.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah. So along kind of that same line here, about 6 weeks ago, there was a moratorium that the county was looking to attach to the land use code, with the fear that if they launched, they open up the new land use code, there might be a rush of applicants prior to that. So they're considering a moratorium on large projects. And between the Legislative Affairs Coalition, which is the Energy Council, Durango Area Association of Realtors, Home Builders Association, Southwest Colorado, and the Chamber, came out with strong opposition, and we were able to stop or remove the moratorium from the new land use code. Are you for or against a moratorium associated with the new land use code?
Well, Jack, I participated in a lot of those online calls with you at those groups, and I had a letter in opposition immediately. I think it might have been the second one in, and that was the most poorly timed, poorly thought out proposal I've ever heard. I mean, here you are, your economy's crashing. You're going to stop a significant portion of it for the convenience of rewriting a new code. It just really bothers me, and we, all of us that were on those calls, were so adamant. I mean, as you know, there was much more spirit in those than you might see in writing. But the one thing that I did is I actually filed a public, Colorado Open Records request to see all the complaints that had been filed after that, because I get worried sometimes. You talk to your own, you have a feedback loop of the people you associate with, so you just keep hearing the story you want to hear over and over. And I thought, well, maybe other people feel differently than I do. Well, the county gave me, I think, 103 responses. 1 was a question, 2 were in favor, and 100 were opposed. And some of them were pretty salty comments. And that just tells me that it was really poorly thought out. And I think that the other thing that bothered me about that is that when all that happened, it was explained to us that we just didn't understand what they were proposing. And I find that kind of insulting, to be quite honest with you. That was a bad move. But you know what? I've made plenty of bad moves in my life, so you just got to pick up and recover. They dropped the idea and move forward. So hats off to the commissioners for that.
Thank you. Would you support legislation or an initiative that would create additional taxes or fees on the sale of real estate? Before you answer that, I'm going to reach over, grab my power cord, because I realized I didn't plug it in, so I'm not leaving you, so I'm going to let you answer, and I'm disappearing for a second. Go ahead. So again, it's an initiative that would create or have additional taxes or fees on the sale of real estate.
Now, do you want me to wait till you get back, or should I just start right in?
Go ahead. I'm listening.
That's a good part of my answer, Jack. I'm always really worried when you identify just like one industry and say, okay, we're going to tax that one, raise the tax. And again, this will have to be approved by the voters. I wouldn't be surprised if some measure would be pretty easy to get approved, actually, because the strategy behind proposing any taxes now is find and isolate an industry that the majority of the voters feel like it's not going to ding them, and then it'll be easier to go through. The tourism industry actually decided to tax itself years ago with a lodger's tax so they could promote tourism in this area. And so, in that particular case, they inflicted the tax on themselves. But as far as the real estate, a proposed tax on the use on real estate is that if we're going to do that, all it's going to do is add to the cost of getting your home. It's just going to add cost. And if people feel that that's a logical way to go, fine. I think it's easy to disparage the real estate industry. But the fact is that I'd rather figure out a way to incentivize people to build or make building costs lower. Therefore, we'll have a higher tax base and more people that are shopping, doing all that sort of thing. I'd rather be proactive to build revenue through business and our consumer activity here in town than just say, okay, there's an industry, let's tax that one.
Great, thank you. Now, one question I did not ask in my previous with Marsh Porter Norton, but I just drove downtown and coming into work this morning, and they've restriped downtown, and you're representing the in-town district, so to speak. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the business bump outs and restriping of downtown.
Well, at the opening of my statement, I said reinvention is key. I give big hats off to everybody that cooperated on that. And it wasn't just a case of the city council saying, hey, let's go restripe the street. There are business owners and BID and the city council, everybody chiming in. I think they've done a really great job in getting ready to adapt to the times. And who knows, Jack, when this is all over, we might realize that that's a great addition to the community to have a downtown that's, maybe it's got reduced traffic, but there's more people space left in there. I think it'd be really difficult to close Main Street completely, but just the fact that they're doing it makes me happy. The merchants and restaurants I see downtown, that they're willing to try anything. I mean, we're a bunch of scrappy fighters around here. And so in case you can't tell, I think it's awesome.
I look forward to heading down there and sitting in one of the bump outs at a bistro set, myself, and checking things out. And a little public endorsement here, but thanks to Tim Walsworth with the Business Improvement District. He has worked incredible hours. He'll be down the town 6 in the morning, helping get the barricades and everything in place. So if you see Tim, tell him thank you. All right, and I will remind everybody, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, and I will address that question here. But I want to ask you, Jack, so what haven't I asked you? It's your opportunity to make some comments of any topics that we haven't covered.
Yeah, I think that one topic that should have been addressed, or to get the thoughts of the candidates, is about the recreation, tourism, visitation industry. I mean, here it is 25 or 30% of our economy. It's super important, and I'm just going to come right out of the box and say I'm really tired of how often that industry gets disparaged. When I hear people say, well, we want good jobs in here, I go, well, I don't mind people saying we want higher paying jobs, but there's a lot of good jobs in the recreation industry. I mean, when you move to a place like Durango to be a ski instructor, or if you grew up here skiing or rafting or biking, or maybe you want to work in the food and beverage business. I mean, that's a lifestyle too. It's a rite of passage for a lot of young people. And there's nothing like being able to say, hey, I'm waking up in Durango, Colorado, and okay, maybe I'm working as a clerk at a t-shirt shop. Well, I think those are good jobs. And I think tourism is going to be, I think the tourism industry will be the fastest recovering element of our business once that we get the all clear as far as COVID goes. People are not going to be flying by, visitors are not going to be flying to Europe as much. The drive market here, there's so many accessible places. And one of the good things is, okay, they impact us when they're here. Maybe it gets a little crowded, but they go home. We don't have to buy schools for them. So I just think that it has huge opportunity. Yes, there's a lot of entry level or lower wage jobs in the tourism business, but I can tell you there's a lot of high paying jobs in the tourism business here too. And I'm very proud of it. All those reasons why tourists come here is why a lot of people on this call probably moved here in the first place. So I'm very high on it. And I can tell you this, as a county commissioner, I'm going to insist that at least one commissioner sit on the board of Dato. I can't believe that either the city or the county basically has an intermediary for that. That's a huge part of our economy. We give the tourism office a lot of money to market the area, and I think that the elected officials ought to keep their pulse on it. And not to be an officer that, if I was on that board, I don't think I'd want to be. In fact, I know I would not want to be an officer or a committee chairman. But you've got to be right in there in the mix and know what's going on as far as our investment to sell this place.
Right. Thank you. Now, you guys, that's not a straight way of saying it. Charlie Minkler and yourself are doing a petition drive. Can you explain why you're having to do that?
Yeah, well, as an independent candidate, we don't belong to a major party, so we have to get the public to nominate us, basically. And for all the whining, you probably heard me say, it's got to be difficult. And the reason for that is you just can't have 100 people signing up on a whim and saying, hey, I think I'll run for county commissioner. But one of the things that I found, and particularly during this COVID crisis, is when the governor orders you not to go near anyone, but then they say, you have to go face to face to get your petition signed, that's really tough. And we made a plea to the governor, could you please allow people to send them in by mail or vote, and they turned all that down. Ironically, they allowed it or he's made an executive order to allow it for statewide offices, and especially where I think their primaries are, and for the petition process. I guess that, if you're in the county, you have a higher resistance to disease, so I guess that's flattering. But the hard part, Jack, is that it's been really expensive to organize these drive-through events that Charlie are doing. We're using up all of our resources to make sure that people feel comfortable being able to sign for us. So that's tough. But on the positive side, I just cannot begin to tell you how much I have enjoyed the people that have taken the time out of their day to come and see us instead of letting us go door to door. And we'll get some of those. But it's been a challenge. And I'm enjoying every minute of it, to be quite honest. I wish it wasn't so expensive, and I hope we don't have so much wind next week. But one thing I will say is that if you elect Charlie and me, we have promised to end the drought. In our first petition signing event last week, we made it rain.
And you probably washed your car. And just real quick, are you doing this again this weekend?
Oh yeah, thanks for the promo. I'm so scared I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, we'll be in Ignacio from 8 to 10:30 on Saturday morning, and we'll be at Durango High School parking lot from noon to 4 p.m. And then the following Saturday, we'll be at the Breen Community Building, 8:30 to 10 in the morning, and then back at Durango High School parking lot from noon to 4 again. Or I'm sure if anybody gets a hold of Charlie or me, we'll quickly dash out to meet you somewhere and get you to sign our petition and give you a brand new souvenir pin untouched by human hands.
Okay. And somebody did ask where in Ignacio?
Borky's Smokehouse.
So get some barbecue too.
I'm planning on it.
Yeah. So a question in the chat. What are your thoughts on building or expanding the emergency management program for La Plata County? Provided the recent pandemic, the riots, wildfire risk, flash flooding, etc. How important is this to you?
Well, I think it's super important. That's got to be high on everybody's agenda. I feel confident that all 4 candidates feel that way. And we've actually got some really good things going on through the wildfire partnership, or I can't remember the exact name of it, but there's thankfully, through Ellen Roberts and some other officials, there's been a lot of federal money allocated to some fire mitigation work down here. But, and by the way, before I even go into what can be done more, if you take all the responders around here, whether it's the sheriff or the Durango police, the fire departments, search and rescue, all those folks, I mean, their track record is just amazingly insane. And they've shown us what they can do with what they have. But boy, if some of these things loaded up on each other like a pandemic on top of a wildfire, I think being prepared. And Jack, one of the things that people can go to my website is that one of the things that I've come to believe that many of us have just undervalued is how important a better food security system is. I mean, if those trucks had stopped running during the shortages we saw in the store, most people around here would be in really serious trouble. And will we be completely independent? It's impossible. But besides just the fact of having some security because we want to make sure we can eat, is that a big part of food security is related to the success of our agricultural industry. And so, again, I hope folks will check out my website. I just posted a video I made there, and I did that in collaboration with a number of our producers around here, and I think it's got some opportunity for us. But yeah, we definitely cannot let up on emergency response.
It's amazing. If I remember seeing it right, I think today is the anniversary date of the Missionary Ridge fire. And speaking of the fire mitigation, and just a reminder to people to, no open fires, things of that nature, and with the dry drought conditions. So I don't see any other questions real quick here in the chat. So with that, I'm going to give you the 3 minutes for closing statements. I'm delaying just to see if anything else pops up. But again, I appreciate your time and again, running for county commissioner. And with that, I'll let you offer your closing statement. You got 3 minutes.
Okay, well, I'm prepared today to make my first promise if I get elected. And that is that if I get elected, I'm not going to endorse any candidate for local office until the ballots are mailed. The 3 county commissioners, they're putting their finger on this election. You know, more than 20 months out, they've endorsed Marcia, and good for her. I think she's an awesome qualified candidate. But the heartache for me is, as I've traveled around this county, I've had people say, well, I'd like to contribute, but since since Marcia's endorsed by all 3 commissioners, is that I'm worried that if I do that, I could suffer the consequences, suffer retribution. And maybe that's not pretty to say, but that's fact. And I think we got to get away from that. So, you know, I encourage them just to own it. Marcia's a really good candidate. She's a decent, good person, has a good track record, and works really hard. But I feel it's a little tilted, to be honest. But I'll quit grinding my teeth about that, and I want to share a funny story with you before I use up my time. And that is that when I first announced, I got this whole slew of congratulations. But the first political comment on my Facebook page was from a good friend of mine who's very active in the Democratic Party, and his remark was, from the looks of the comments, you're just a Republican light. And, you know, for a little context here, I've never been a Republican. I was a registered Democrat until they allowed independents to vote in the primaries. Now, he was just having fun with me. But in every humor, there's a kernel of truth. And the first reaction was to reshape the conversation so that it's going to be Democrat versus Republican. That's the playbook. That's the book that I would like to rewrite for local elections. Now, on the other side of the aisle, the minute I announced, I received all these calls and praise from folks that, you know, probably most of them voted Republican, and they just were so happy I was running. They offered to endorse me. They were making all sorts of snarky comments about the opposition and the current commissioners. Liberals in general, and you know the game. And I told those people, look, if you're pledging to vote for me now, it's because you like me, or you like my family, or just because you don't like the Democrats. And Jack, those are all 3 terrible reasons to vote for anyone. You find out about the candidates and then think for yourself. That's my message to everybody. I'm the underdog in this race for a whole lot of reasons, especially because I'm not backed by a party. But in closing, I want to say this, is that you don't have to join formal organizations to do good work. The only clubs I've ever belonged to in my life are the Four Corners Rock and Mineral Club and the Explorers Club in New York City. But since I've entered the race, I joined the Farmers Bureau and the Cattlemen's Association. And they were really happy about that. But I explained to them that I didn't join those organizations to promote their agenda. I just want to hear what they have to say. And some of those people, they were not too happy. And I said, well, look, I also participate in the Green Business Roundtable, and I donated to San Juan Citizens Alliance. And there's a lot of other organizations around that I've done the same for. And I just believe that all these groups love La Plata County, and they all need to be heard. and I don't agree with everything in any of those organizations, but they all have something good to contribute. So I want to be a commissioner that's unpredictable. And by that, I mean that when someone brings business before the county, is that they aren't predisposed to think I'm going to come out one way or another. And I want everyone to know that if you make a compelling case for an issue, I'll listen and support you. And my hope for this election is that whoever wins does so by 20 points and not a 2% margin, because that's going to show confidence by a majority of the people, and that could be the start of hitting the reset and pulling together instead of apart. So I'm not asking any of you to vote for me right now, but I'm asking you to put aside any predisposed political leanings, and that over the next couple of months, you'll give both Marcia and me a chance, and then you'll decide who you want to have sitting in that chair. And with that, I just can say that I'm really happy to be here, and I'm thank you, Jack, and everybody that took an hour out of their day to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll let you plug. What's your website?
electjackturner.com. Check out the video section.
All right. Well, Jack, thank you for your time. And again, thank you for running for County Commissioner. And thank everybody for attending today's Meet the Candidates. We'll have the next one again on Tuesday next week, but it'll be from 1 to 2 o'clock with Charlie Minkler. Go to durangobusiness.org and register. And then the 18th, we will have Matt Salka from 11 to noon. So with that, I'll wrap things up. Again, Jack, thank you so much. And thank everybody for attending. Be safe out there, and we'll see you at the next event. Take care.